Welcome to the Master Your Exit live show, powered by the Big Exit. I'm Graham Stephen. I'm standing in for Lynn today, and I'll be your host. On this Master Your Exit live show, we bring practical insights, expert interviews, and tools to help small business owners like you prepare for your big exit. This live show is every Tuesday at 8 a.m. LA time, 11 a.m. New York time, 3 p.m. London time, and 4 p.m. Brussels time. We keep each show short and simple, 30 minutes max. If you're tuning in live on our YouTube or LinkedIn channel, welcome. If you've joined us live here in our virtual Zoom studio, awesome. You can drop all your exit questions in our studio chat and we answer them live on the show today. If you're catching this episode later, you can find more episodes of the show on our website at www.thebigexit.co, Master Your Exit Shows, or listen to the audio version on your favorite podcast platform. On today's show, we're going to be tackling a user question which was received in the past week. So that question was, we often talk about an exit, but what does the exit process actually look like and how long does it take? So for those of us who are involved with this day in and day out, we kind of take it for granted. But as a business owner, we have to realize that a lot of business owners are doing this once, maybe twice in their lifetime. So, what we take for granted as experts in this field, not every business owner knows. So today I'm going to kind of break that down into a few different sections. So first of all, preparing a business for sale and going through an exit process can take anywhere from 6 months to over 2 years. It all depends on how ready you are for that exit. And I'm going to break down today what some of those steps are. So essentially, it's about 10 or 11 steps that we go through in, let's call it a business sale process. And we're going to unpack each of those bit by bit. Just to give an overview, though, the first one is what we call data room collation and business preparation. We then talk about drafting of a teaser or an information memorandum and an information memorandum, a circulation of a teaser document, acquirer vetting or research around potential acquirers or buyers, the acquirer selection and getting them to issue what we call a LOI or letter of intent, the due diligence process, negotiations, execution of the actual sale and sale agreements, the securing of funding. This is something that actually tends to happen in parallel, or a buyer usually has to have funding in place before they even engage the process. And then the actual sale investment and the handover from the owner or the seller to the new buyer. So those are kind of the steps in going through an exit or a sale of your business. So let's break that down a little bit. So the first point is around actually preparing for a sale and exit. So in some instances, your business might not actually be ready to sell, in which instance there could be some work to be had. We've spoken about this many times. So, is the business dependent on you as the owner? Have you documented your systems and processes and all those things? Now, when it comes to a sale, these things really come home to roost because the buyer is going to want to check that all these things are in place. So while you're preparing the business for exit, you generally prepare what is called a data room. Now, that data room is a record of what's going on in your business, from financial records through to contracts with customers, to clients. And a little bit later in the process, we talk about something called due diligence. That's that inspection process that a buyer will do. And usually what they would do is they'd go to this data room and actually go and inspect and check all the documents that are there. So that's the first step, is actually getting that data room ready. And then also preparing the business for exit, giving it that sort of curb appeal. So we like to use analogies. If you're going to get your house ready for sale, before you sell the house, you're going to make sure that the garden is neat and tidy, that all the cracks in the wall are patched up and painted over. You're not trying to hide anything, but you want to make sure that the house is in its best state for sale. And it's the same with your business. You want to make sure that you do all those little things that don't become value detractors, down the line. You also need to kind of be able to demonstrate to the potential buyer why this is a good acquisition for them, what the growth strategy looks like going forward, what the potential benefits are that they can realize from that acquisition. So preparing the business for sale is more than just getting the data room ready. It's actually making sure that the business is ready. So once you've done that, you then move on to identification of potential acquirers. So you've decided you want to sell your business, you're going to take it to market. And this is about actually seeing who is interested in buying your business. Now, there's a bunch of different ways that you can do that, but it is important that you don't just go out in a sort of spray and pray approach and hope that people are going to come. So generally what you would do is you prepare some sort of teaser document. So this is a sort of non-identifying profile of your business. You wouldn't necessarily want at this stage all your customers and everyone to know that your business is for sale. So this teaser document is just a opportunity to kind of highlight the key points of your business, the sector you're in, what kind of revenues you're making, why it's potentially attractive. And while you're doing that, you are thinking about who are the potential acquirers that you want to sell to. Is it a private equity acquirer? Is it potential competitors? Is it a trade buyer? So going through this process, you've got to think about who your potential acquirer is and how are you going to kind of present the business to them, very simply, to see whether there is an expression of interest. At this point, the type of acquirer that you get can also influence the sale price of your business. We often talk about a strategic buyer versus a financial buyer. Now, a strategic buyer is usually somebody who sees massive synergy or strategic benefit in acquiring your business, and they may be prepared to pay a premium for that. In the real world, though, strategic buyers are often, further apart than one might realize. In a typical deal process, I would see probably 1 in 10 buyers as being strategic buyers. The others are more financial buyers. But don't hang your hat on finding a strategic buyer. I think you've got to look at both and think about who are those people that you want to approach to market your firm to. Once you've kind of done that assessment, then you need to think about who are the targeted acquirers. So now you've got a list of potential acquirers. Who are those parties that you actually want to go out to? There might be some that you want to exclude or preclude from discussions. If it's a really close competitor, for instance, you might not want to engage them. And different sellers might have different reasons for excluding certain acquirers, but it's an important step to take and say, who do you not want to sell to? For instance, if you are a business who's very value driven or values driven, you might not want to sell to an unscrupulous acquirer who's basically going to, I don't know, potentially retrench all your staff and completely turn the business around. I mean, a buyer can obviously do what they like, but certain sellers are very emotionally attached to their business and they want to see that legacy continued. So it's an important process to go and say who are the targeted acquirers. Once you've done that, you also need to vet those. Well, actually, I'm skipping a step here. So you go out and you find potential acquirers, and some of them might express an interest in engaging further. Now, at this point, what you would do is you'd usually sign an NDA. An NDA is basically a document that says everything that gets discussed from this point onwards is confidential. I mean, that's things like even disclosing the business name. So at this point, once you've signed an NDA, it provides protection for you as the seller and also for the buyer. And to make sure that any information at this stage, you're going to kind of open up the door so they can go and look and check your business is properly handled and it's not just kind of shared openly on the open market. So there are some risks here, but the NDA does provide a level of protection in that regard. And that's an important step. You also then need to vet the potential acquirer. So just because somebody said they're interested, it doesn't mean that they necessarily have the financial means to acquire you. So you need to ask those questions. As much as the acquirer is going to do a due diligence on your business, you also need to say, is this a legitimate buyer? Often people talk about £1 Charlies, so these are guys who kind of pose as real buyers. They're really trying to get your trade secrets and acquire the business at a very low commitment from their side and pay you from the profits. Now, in some instances, that might be a suitable exit strategy. But for the most part, you want to make sure that the acquirer's actually got money. Then what happens is you've done your teaser, you've sent out your information memorandum, you've got some buyers who are potentially interested, you've signed some NDAs. At this point, you're usually going to get some sort of indicative offer. So you've shared some information about your business, and that's what we call the information memorandum. It goes further than the teaser document. It shows what profits you're making, a little bit about your strategy, your competitors, all of those sorts of things. And these interested parties will then make what we call an indicative offer, usually, or a non-binding offer. So once you've narrowed it down to a few buyers, they go through this process and they say, these are the kind of high-level terms that we'd like to acquire your business for. So it talks to valuation, it talks to potentially the structure of the deal. And at this point, it's really important that you flesh out all the sort of key terms. You're going to get perhaps 3 or 4 indicative offers at this stage. And again, you're going to use this as an opportunity to filter out offers that maybe don't meet your criteria. So, it could be from a valuation point of view, it could be in terms of the structure, how they want to pay for this, that might exclude certain buyers. But you've got to go through this process of seeing which of those offers now are actually real offers and that are suitable for you as the seller. And then normally what will happen is you'll get down to 1 or 2 buyers who want to make a serious offer. Okay. And a lot of buyers will at this point insist on exclusivity. So you have one party who you're negotiating with to actually close a deal. And once this happens, you've signed this exclusive period. In most instances, you go into what we call a due diligence process. So you've signed this non-binding, you've accepted one of the non-binding offers or the indicative offers. You've agreed you're going to move into a due diligence stage. And this is when the acquirer comes in and they kind of look under the hood. Okay. There's a couple of steps in this. One is what they call a financial due diligence. The second is a legal due diligence. And the third is an operational due diligence. So the financial due diligence does what it says. It looks at the financial accuracy of the business. What profits are you making? What are your growth plans? What processes and that do you have in place in terms of managing the finances of the business? So is what you said about the business in the financial, in the teaser or the information memorandum, is that actually true? Secondly, there's a legal due diligence. So a legal due diligence looks at things like the compliance status of the company. Have you filed all your returns? Have you got impending legal actions against you? Basically, are you compliant? Are you operating legally? Have you got contracts with your customers? What do the terms and conditions say? So that's a legal due diligence. An acquirer will go through and they'll check all those things. And then the last one is what we call the operational due diligence. So this is, looking at the fundamental business processes and the procedures of the company. So what this due diligence does is it serves to satisfy the potential acquirer of the accuracy of what's being presented to the business, to make sure that they're not, thinking that they're buying a Rolls Royce, and meanwhile it's a cardboard cutout of a Rolls Royce with, it's actually a Mini Cooper underneath all of that. So that's what the due diligence does. It serves to kind of say, is this business what you purport it to be? There's a lot of highly confidential information that's shared. And again, that's why having NDAs and all of that are really, really important. And your supplier or your acquirer vetting is really important. Particularly if you've got a competitor, for instance, that's coming in and doing a due diligence and potential acquisition, you've got to make sure that they are serious. Else they could come in, they could look under the hood and then go and basically copy what you're doing. So the due diligence is important. It usually has a very defined period. So due diligence can take anywhere from 2 weeks to 6 weeks, maybe even 2 months. Generally not much longer than that, but it's got to allow sufficient time for exploration, but not actually being that long that the business can't really trade and operate, because it's intensive. As the owner or the founder of the business, you're going to be answering a lot of those questions. You're going to provide documentation. Looping back to what we said at the beginning, that's why having a data room is super important, because the stuff and preparing that in advance is really important, because the stuff that they're going to look for in the due diligence is usually housed within that data room. So if everything's there, all neatly filed away, it's easy for the person doing the due diligence tripping over my tongue here, to get that information. While this is happening, or once the due diligence has been concluded, the outcome may affect the initial purchase consideration. So if in due diligence it turns out that you're not making $5 million a year profit, but you're actually only making $3 million a year profit, it might impact the purchase price or the indicative offer price. And so there's a second negotiation that happens here. Yeah, if everything is as you say it is, often there's no changes at this point. But it's important that this step happens. So depending on what the initial terms were, the acquirer may also amend or withdraw their offer entirely if they're not satisfied with the due diligence process. But at this point, you move into, once you've had a satisfactory due diligence outcome, you would then move into kind of finalizing the deal. And you would usually sign what we call a binding offer or binding agreement between the parties. While all of this is happening, and usually acquirers wouldn't, like serious acquirers wouldn't go into a potential deal like this without having funding and all of those sorts of things in place. But at some point, you have to make sure that the acquirer has got the funds in place. And sometimes funders or sometimes acquirers wait till after the sort of due diligence has been done to conclude and finalize all that funding. There might be some external debt that's needed, but all those things need to be done. So, and it might need to be approved by the board of the acquirers. Usually it would go to what they call an investment committee. That investment committee will kind of sign off on the purchase. It will kind of be a final rubber stamping of the process. Another thing I didn't touch on earlier is sometimes there are regulatory approvals. So if it's a larger transaction, and I know we're speaking here mainly to smaller businesses, but in certain instances, you may need to make sure that you're not in breach of any competition requirements or various other regulations. So that is a step that sometimes happens in a transaction. And then usually once the agreement has happened, you then go into actually concluding the legal documents that support that. So there's a few legal documents that need to be resolved usually. One is what we call the SPA, or the share purchase agreement, if you're purchasing the shares of the company. This is really everything that takes what's been negotiated and puts down in a legally binding contract. There's also kind of secretarial stuff. So once that's all signed and done and dusted, shareholder agreements, the issuing and cancelling of shares, changing it from the old shareholder to the new shareholder. This is the execution of the deal. So once that agreement has become effective, the risk and the benefit transfer. It's like when you're purchasing a motor vehicle and when you drive out of the showroom, and if you have a crash in the car, and damage the car, you as the new owner are responsible for that. So you've got to make sure that the insurance, the documents, and everything are signed before you take control of the business. And then obviously the handover of the business. If it's a majority sale, it's unlikely that you kind of sign the documents, have the money put in your bank for the sale, and then you walk away the next day. It does happen, but usually there's what we call a handover period. This is a period when the acquirer will have access to the seller, either in the business for a period of time, or as a consultant to actually help them with the transition of the business. So in some instances, there might even be an earn-out payment where the previous owner has to stick around to make sure that the sort of targets that have been agreed are actually delivered on. So a portion of the purchase price might actually be paid as an earn-out. So I've run through it quite quickly, but in a nutshell, actually going through a sales process is a very structured process. It's important that you don't go into a process like this blind. Selling a business is not like putting some secondhand goods on eBay, concluding the transaction in a few minutes. There's a robust procedure, robust process, and it's important that you have professional help to actually navigate you through the process. The one thing I haven't touched on, and if Lynn was here, I should probably talk about this as well, is it can be an incredibly emotionally draining and taxing process. Most business owners are used to running the business, whether they're intimately involved, even from a bit of a distance. So stepping out and doing a sale process is very different to, let's say, running a plumbing business or running a marketing business. So having expert help in this is super useful, but also sometimes dealing with the sort of emotional aspect, the highs and the lows. Is the deal going to happen? Is it not going to happen? can be actually quite draining and quite daunting. So that's a brief overview of what it actually takes to go through an exit process. So to summarize, yeah, preparing a business for sale can take anywhere from 6 months to over 2 years. Okay. There are a number of steps in that process, from preparation of the business, preparing a data room, drafting of a teaser document, an information memorandum, circulating that, finding potential buyers and acquirers and vetting them, getting letters of intent or indicative offers from some of those buyers, and then selecting one that you actually want to move forward with and allowing them to kind of peek under the hood. So that's what we call the due diligence process. Final negotiations, once the due diligence has been concluded, the execution of the deal, the securing of the funding, which kind of happens in parallel, and then the actual sale and the handover to the new owners. So that's what it entails to sell a business. Whether you're selling a big business or a small business, the steps are the same. They might be slightly quicker, they might take slightly longer, but those are the key steps that you need to go through. It's important that you don't skip any of those along the way. So quite a technical subject today. I hope that answers the question. I think that's a wrap of this week's episode. I've been quite lonely here on my own without Lynn to kind of have a bit of banter with, but that's a wrap for this week's episode of the Master Your Exit live show. Thank you for joining us today. I hope you're leaving with valuable insights to help you prepare for your big exit. Remember, you can catch the replay of this episode and all other episodes on our website at www.thebigexit.co/master your exit shows, or listen to the audio version on your favorite podcast platform. Now, we'd love to hear from you. So for our next session, send in your exit questions before next week's show by heading over to the website. You can also sign up there or send us your exit questions so we can answer them in future episodes. We'll be back again next Tuesday at 8 a.m. Pacific time, 11 a.m. East Coast or New York time, 3 p.m. London time, and 4 p.m. Brussels time, with more tips, expert interviews, and tools to help you master your exit. Until then, keep building, keep preparing, and we'll see you next week.